A month after my husband's infidelity was discovered and talk of divorce began, my husband broke the news to me while I was at home.
Hey, have you decided on a job yet? I really want to file for divorce soon.
Is there a rush?
I want to bring her here, but she'd be uncomfortable if you were around. I want to start a family with her as soon as possible.
My husband left, looking annoyed. Then my mother-in-law eagerly jumped in as well.
When are you leaving?
Right, Mom? You. Don't think you could be too complacent just because we're nice to you. Know your place, okay?
With a smile, I looked at my instigating mother-in-law and husband. I'll gracefully disappear by tomorrow.
Oh, really? I can't wait for tomorrow.
My mother-in-law and husband left the room, laughing heartily. Little did they know, I was quietly smirking behind their backs. My name is Audrey Stevens. I'm a 45-year-old housewife with a part-time job. Originally, I worked as a furniture designer for a major company. At that time, when we were in our mid-20s, I became close with a sales rep who frequently visited the company.
The furniture you create is warm and stylish. Truly wonderful.
Those words were spoken by Carlos, who would later become my husband. Carlos was working as a salesman for an advertising company at the time, and his performance was excellent. As time passed, we started going out for meals together and gradually deepened our relationship. He proposed to me in our second year of dating, and I happily accepted. With the blessing of my family, we were now ready to take the next step and visit his parents' house. He's an only child, and his parents are both prominent figures. Furthermore, his father holds a high position in a large corporation, so his family home was quite impressive. As we entered, I nervously lowered my head. Nice to meet you. My name is Audrey. Then my father-in-law, who was sitting in a luxurious one-person chair, smiled and said,
Oh, don't be so stiff. From now on, we're family. Please, relax.
His gentle voice made me feel relieved as I looked up. But what caught my eye next was the figure of my mother-in-law, Helen, glaring at me.
You're Carlos's girlfriend? You have such a plain face.
Huh? Ignoring my surprise, my mother-in-law continued.
So, where do you work?
Well, I'm a designer at a company called N Corporation.
Your workplace isn't too impressive. And what about your family background? What do your parents do?
My parents are farmers. Upon hearing my answer, my mother-in-law sneered.
Farming? So you're just a country bumpkin. You think someone raised in such a household can become part of our family?
My mother-in-law turned to Carlos and said,
Carlos, it's not right to marry someone like her. I will find you a suitable wife.
Mom, but...
As Carlos looked puzzled, my father-in-law continued sternly.
Hey, Helen, stop talking to Audrey like that. We should respect the decisions these two make.
Then Carlos followed suit.
Mom, I've been with Audrey for a long time already. As a man, I have to take responsibility.
While my mother-in-law remained silent with a sullen expression, she eventually spoke up.
Well, if Carlos insists to that extent, then I'll accept the marriage. But after marriage, you must live in this house. That's non-negotiable.
Living together? Surely my mother-in-law was glaring at me as I let out a surprised voice.
Yes, Carlos is currently living in this house. If you move in, everything will be fine, won't it? That's what it means to be a bride.
Then Carlos said to me,
I didn't mention it earlier, but I also wanted to live together with my parents. Is that okay with you, Audrey?
I didn't know that. Okay. At that moment, my father-in-law spoke up.
Audrey, don't push yourself too hard. You're free to leave this house anytime both of you want.
Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law, with her first smile of the day, said,
Well then, it's settled. Audrey, do your best to become the ideal bride.
All I could do was bow my head and say, thank you. Afterward, Carlos and I registered our marriage. After having our wedding ceremony, we moved to my husband's parents' house. However, on that day, my mother-in-law said to me,
Audrey, From now on, be prepared to work hard as a daughter-in-law of the Stevens family.
Yes. The next day, my mother-in-law instructed me to do all the household chores in the large house. When I protested, saying, "I'm working, so it's impossible," she glared at me and said,
"Are you answering back as a daughter-in-law?"
which made me shrink back. So I was spending my days doing household chores in silence, but one day my father-in-law noticed. At that moment, my father-in-law intervened and took over some of the household chores for me, relieving me of about half of them. My mother-in-law seemed frustrated, but she couldn't say anything against my father-in-law's decision. Living together, my father-in-law became my ally, and it was a great help to me. Then, tragedy struck. One day, my father-in-law collapsed at work and never returned home. The sudden event caused shock and grief among the family. I, too, could not keep up with the sudden death of my father-in-law, whom I adored. Later, I helped with the funeral arrangements, provided support, and sent donations. My mother-in-law seemed frail, and my husband was also in shock, but over time they both seemed to regain their composure. 6 months after my father-in-law's passing, I found myself once again burdened with household chores by my mother-in-law. One day, Carlos says something like this.
"Hey, Audrey, I'm thinking about starting a business."
"Huh? Starting a business?"
"Yeah, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to be the CEO. My dad left me a big inheritance, so I'm going to use that as the initial capital."
Oh, wait a minute. This is the first I'm hearing about you wanting to start a company. What kind of company are you planning to create? Carlos then looked proud.
"Well, it's going to be a stylish design firm."
"But you're a salesperson at an advertising agency. You can't design."
"You can join my company when I start it, and I'll scout a few more people, so it'll be fine."
Are you telling me to quit my job? Will it really work out with such optimistic expectations? My mother-in-law, who had been listening to the conversation with a serious expression, intervened.
"It's a wife's duty to follow her husband's decision. Just cooperate with Carlos."
And so I ended up joining the design firm my husband was creating without being able to object. Initially, it was quite tough, and getting work was a struggle. Carlos was out there every day hustling as the face of the company. At the beginning of the company, there were only 2 of us, myself and another designer, so we worked desperately within a tight budget. However, one day, the furniture I crafted garnered praise as stylish and was featured in a magazine. From then on, work started pouring in, and our reputation began to rise. On the other hand, in my personal life, I continued to be troubled by my mother-in-law's bullying.
"It's already the 3rd year of your marriage. Audrey, why aren't you pregnant yet?"
"I'm sorry, Mom."
"Sorry won't cut it. All my friends have grandchildren. Why don't I have any?"
"But right now, work is really demanding."
"Oh, even though we took in a country bumpkin of a daughter from the countryside, she turns out to be infertile. Honestly, what a disappointment. I feel sorry for Carlos, too."
I bit my lip and never mentioned a certain fact to my mother-in-law. After that, I just contributed to my work. Thanks to those efforts, the company flourished and gradually stabilized. And now, my husband and I are celebrating our 17th wedding anniversary, and I have become at the head of the design team at that company. On the other hand, Carlos started saying things like,
"I'm going out for business drinks,"
and stopped coming home as often. But I noticed something. Carlos would often come home smelling like women's perfume. At first, I thought it was from a bar, but since I kept smelling the same perfume over and over, I started to suspect something was wrong. So, I hired an investigator. When the results arrived a few weeks later, I felt dizzy. The results were damning. Carlos was having an affair with a young woman named Sarah. According to the investigation, Sarah used to be a hostess at a gentleman's club, but had quit, and Carlos was now mostly supporting her. Photos of them dining at fancy restaurants and entering hotels together were included. I was furious, and during my mother-in-law's bullying and supporting Carlos, both personally and professionally, only to face this betrayal, I'll make him pay for it. I won't forgive him. I called the detective agency again and requested something. Just as I was planning when to confront him about the affair, Carlos called me to the living room, saying he had something to talk about. When I went there, I saw my mother-in-law and Carlos sitting side by side. "What's this about?" As I broached the subject, Carlos informed me.
"Hey, Audrey, how about a divorce?" I've found someone I love.
So it's finally come to this. I braced myself. The person you love, is it Sarah? My words surprised both my husband and my mother-in-law.
How did you know? You must have snooped around as usual. You devious little thing. Well, if you know that much, then it's straightforward. Since she's pregnant, let's end it.
Pregnant? To my surprise, my mother-in-law exclaimed emotionally.
Yes, that's right. It must be frustrating for you not being able to have children, but that's the reality. I'm finally going to be a grandmother, so I feel relieved.
Oh, I see.
Well, even if we divorce, I can still let you stay at the company, you know? Because you're so pitiful.
Oh, Carlos, how kind of you.
Facing the laughter from them, I calmly stated. Understood. I agreed to the divorce, and I'll also quit my job.
Huh? You're quitting?
Yes, I don't want to work at a company where the cheating husband is the president. Until I decide where to live and find a new job, please let me stay here for the time being.
If that's the case, maybe we should be a little lenient, Carlos.
In response to my mother-in-law's words, Carlos also agreed.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
So I signed the divorce papers and left, promising to submit them later. After that, I hurried to make preparations. While I continued to live as if nothing had happened, my husband hardly ever came home, and my mother-in-law's sarcasm filled the house. I endured it silently, waiting for the right moment. 1 month after the divorce discussion.
Hey, have you decided on a job yet? I want to submit the divorce papers soon.
Why the rush?
Because I want to bring my girlfriend here, but she'll hate it if you're around. I can't wait to be a family with her.
My husband said to me with a look of annoyance. Then my mother-in-law eagerly jumped in as well.
So, when are you leaving?
Right, Mom? You don't think you can be too complacent just because we're nice to you. Know your place.
With a smile, I looked at my instigating mother-in-law and husband. I'll gracefully disappear by tomorrow.
Oh, really? I can't wait for tomorrow.
My mother-in-law and husband left the room laughing heartily. Little did they know I was quietly smirking behind their backs. The next day, while my mother-in-law and Carlos were out, I called a moving company to transport my belongings to the new place. During this long period of living together, I had bought most of the furniture and appliances myself. Despite asking Carlos and my mother-in-law for money, they ignored me. So I only took what I bought myself, leaving the house empty. Finally, I placed an envelope in the corner of the living room and paid respects to my late father-in-law's portrait. Thus, I left the marital home where I had lived for many years. A few hours later, my phone rang. The caller was Carlos. Since I was busy with the moving process, I ignored the call. A few hours later, my call history and messages were filled with notifications. Then the phone rang again. Hello?
Hey, Audrey, what do you think you're doing?
What do you mean?
Why are you taking all the furniture and appliances with you? How are we supposed to live?
Facing the confrontational tone, I calmly responded. I bought all the furniture and appliances with my own money. What's wrong with taking them? Besides, you hardly ever use any appliances, right? It's not like they're going to waste. When confronted with the facts, Carlos struggled for words.
Well, whatever. We can buy new furniture and appliances easily. After all, I'm the CEO.
Is that so? By the way, did you see the envelope I left in the living room?
Huh? Envelope?
It seemed that Carlos and his mother hadn't noticed the envelope I left behind, so I hung up the phone and continued to ignore them until the next day. My phone kept ringing incessantly. The next day, my mother-in-law and husband showed up at my place. Both of them looked pale. How did you find this place?
I got it out of the moving company. But more importantly, what is this?
Oh, you saw it. Inside the envelope, I left behind with several documents. Carlos thrusts one of them at me.
What do you mean I am incapable of having children?
Yes, that document was proof of his infertility. I secretly had your sample tested a long time ago. The results speak for themselves. If you doubt it, you can get retested.
That's impossible, because Sarah's carrying my child.
Are you sure one of these men aren't the father of the child in her stomach? So I spilled the results of the investigation into Sarah's background that I had requested from the private detective agency. There, Sarah was depicted cozying up to several different men, entering hotels together.
What is that woman doing? This can't be true, can it? My grandchild!
Seeing my mother-in-law hysterically screaming, I almost burst into laughter. By the way, did you see the other documents?
Huh?
It seems that Carlos and my mother-in-law didn't notice the other documents I had placed in the envelope, as they were too focused on the infertility results. Carlos gasped as he peered into the envelope.
Oh my, what's this?
Yes, those are resignation letters from all the designers in your company.
What?
I calmly explained to him the situation. When I informed them of my resignation, all of my subordinates said they would resign too. They have been discontent with your management for a long time, but they stayed in the company because of me. So from now on, I've decided to take care of all of them.
Take care of them?
I'm starting my own design firm, with those who admire me. Thank you for letting me stay in this house until the preparations for the business and the tenant contracts are finalized.
What did you say? Then our company won't be able to function.
He seemed to finally understand the gravity of the situation, his face turning even paler. Then my mother-in-law launched an attack on me.
You're despicable. Poaching talent from Carlos's company.
I smirked at her words. Please, say what you want. It's quite amusing, isn't it? A design firm without any designers. My mother-in-law gritted her teeth in frustration. Ignoring her, I addressed the still confused Carlos. I forgot to mention I'm demanding alimony and property division from you.
What? You've already destroyed the happiness between me and Sarah, and now you're trying to ruin the company too?
Finally, I cut to the chase. Yes, indeed. I will never forgive you. I will push you to the edge. I'll hire a lawyer and squeeze every penny out of you. Once you understand, pay up and never show your face in front of me. Again, you scum. Leaving the pathetic pair behind, I walked away. Later, the divorce between me and Carlos was finalized. I managed to secure $30,000 in compensation for his infidelity and from the property division. Afterward, it seemed Carlos underwent another examination, but the infertility result remained unchanged and he broke up with his mistress. My mother-in-law's dream of having a grandchild was shattered. Before leaving the company, I reported the suspicions of Carlos's embezzlement to the tax office. I suspected he was using company funds for gifts to Sarah or paying for hotels. As a result of the investigation, Carlos's tax evasion was exposed, and he was fined and had to pay back taxes. Eventually, my mother-in-law and Carlos had to sell their family home. Unemployed and in debt, Carlos now lives with his mother in a cramped apartment, working tirelessly every day. He once called me seeking help, but I ignored his call without mercy. It's all their own fault. On the other hand, I've started my own design firm and enjoy working with my colleagues. The company's performance is skyrocketing, and I couldn't be happier. I'm determined to continue working hard and embracing life with optimism.